Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. I'm really happy to have you here with me today. We are heading down to the garden to do some harvesting. We're going to be harvesting all of our apples off of our apple tree. We are going to be picking a ton of onions and getting those curing, and I'm going to show you how I do that in a couple minutes. We are also going to pick a whole bunch of celery and get that going in the freeze dryer. I have a bunch of work that I need to do over here in front of my little greenhouse. I need to pull out a whole bunch of these straw flowers. It's kind of a shame because they are still blooming, adding some beautiful color to this part of the garden. But I have a bunch of herbs in this bed that are getting choked out by these straw flowers. My plan is to pick all of the straw flowers that still have beautiful color on them and get those drying for winter bouquets. These straw flowers grow with dry petals like this, and they make really beautiful dried flowers, and to have some nice bouquets in the winter time is going to be lovely, I'm sure. So my plan is to pick a bunch of these, get those drying in the little greenhouse back here, which is where I also dry or cure my onions. The other thing that I have to do over here is prune back this massive tarragon that you can see here. I am going to be pulling some of the leaves off this tarragon. Yeah, I think I still will. There's still some nice looking ones in there. I cannot remember which country it is where it's common to make tarragon vinegar. So if you know, let me know down in the comment section. But I've received several comments from people from that country saying that tarragon vinegar is awesome. So I'm going to do that. And then the other thing is, in order to get into our greenhouse here easily, we need to get this all cut back. So I think we're going to get on that right away. The other thing that I'm going to try to do today is to pull up some of our horseradish root to make some horseradish sauce. I don't know if we'll actually get to making the sauce today, but we're going to get the roots pulled up, or some of them anyway. What else do we have to do in here? I am at the tail end of a head cold, so if I sound a little bit nasally, that is why. These pumpkins, you guys, oh my goodness. I don't know if you can tell how, I'll see if I can get closer, how big this pumpkin is, but it is huge and I have lots of them. Well, this is interesting. Look at this one. That has never happened in all my years of growing squash, where a squash starts shriveling up and going soft on the vine like that. I wonder what caused that. So I guess we'll be picking this one and giving that one to the turkeys. I still have not butchered my turkeys yet. I've been talking about it for 2 weeks. I just have not had the time. And this cold actually set me back a couple of days. I was planning on doing it day before yesterday, but that's when the cold actually hit. So that'll be something that I'll probably do this coming up weekend, I think. Let's start with getting this all cleared out here. So I'm just going to go through and snip off all of the ones that still have lots of color on them like this. And then I'll go through with my big snippers and snip back all the other ones right to the ground. I'm not going to pull them out like I was originally thinking of doing, because I don't want to disrupt all the soil in around where all the herbs are. I showed this in my last video, but for those of you that missed it, I'll just show you how straw flowers seed. They seed very similarly to the way a dandelion does. Isn't that pretty? Actually, you know, it's probably not a bad idea for me to grab an envelope to put some seed into while I'm out here doing this. This sweet alyssum just smells so good. Cutting this right back about a month ago was a good idea. The colors on these are just beautiful, aren't they? I love straw flowers, and I am most definitely going to grow them again. But I won't be growing them in a raised bed like this. I will grow them in the ground. The colors on these are just gorgeous. Remember when I first started growing, I thought they all were the same color, but I ended up with tons of different colors in here. From this kind of corally red color to pink to peach. This one, I think right here, I think might be my favorite. This bright orange yellow color. have a bunch of bumblebees sleeping in these. One thing that I have always noticed this time of year is if you come out early in the morning, you'll find bumblebees resting on the flowers like this. And this is particularly true in sunflowers. And so I did some reading on this a couple of years ago, and it turns out that the flowers themselves and the plants, they can absorb some heat from the sun. And when the bumblebees, or when it starts getting cold this time of year, the bumblebees will kind of nest up inside the flowers to stay warm during the night when it's cold. Hello, honey, how are you? Oh, you're starting to get your thick coat, aren't you? You're such a good girl. I think that should do us. So I'm just going to put these in here. I'm just going to lay them out to dry out in here. I don't have time right now, but technically you should pull off all of the leaves when you're going to dry straw flowers like this, but I'll just pull them off once they're all dry. There we go. Now we'll go cut down all these guys. Definitely want some of these gorgeous orange ones for seed. There, now you can actually see the sage and the parsley in here. I have a bunch of mint in here as well that I'm going to cut right now to dry. I had these little tiny lavenders in here that got completely choked out. I have a little rosemary in here that I'm actually going to pull out and put into a pot. For the most part, rosemary does not overwinter here very well, but I have been able to overwinter it inside. So I'm just going to run and grab a pot and do that right now. Otherwise, I know I'm going to forget, and then winter's going to come. Got some fresh potting soil in here. I'll take this out. So there we go, and put it in our pot. And we'll just prune back this piece right here, and this one right there. That should work. I'll just dry these little clippings inside. There we go. I am tempted to do that with my little lavenders here as well. Has anybody overwintered lavender indoors before? I have not. Some more mint in here. Of course, mint just gets in everywhere. I know I have lemon balm hiding down in here. Oh, it smells so good. Remember how sad my lemon balm was? It has spread all over in here. So I'm just going to leave this and let it grow for the next couple weeks, and then I'll come in and do a big harvest on it. And I might consider pulling some of this out as well and overwintering that inside. And then we have mint, mint everywhere. But we also have some oregano in here as well. A little tiny bit of thyme in underneath. So I think we'll leave all of that. Some of this could potentially overwinter. The oregano could potentially overwinter. The sage, potentially. We did overwinter one last year, but we had a fairly mild winter last year. So I'll definitely leave that in the ground. This sage is looking a little sad, and sage does not like cold weather. So I'm actually going to harvest this right now. I don't actually need a lot of sage. I have quite a bit that I've dried throughout this summer. We don't use a ton of sage in cooking, but don't want to see that gorgeous sage go to waste. And because these are in raised beds, the likelihood of them overwintering is even less likely than if they were in the ground, because raised beds, of course, freeze more solidly all the way down to the base of the roots of these plants. We'll leave them in there and give them a try anyway. And I'm going to pull off this parsley right now. Parsley is something I use lots of. And this one too. This bed's looking a little bit sad now, and it's about to look even sadder when I cut back the tarragon. The stuff breaks off pretty easily. So I'll just snap these off, and then I'm going to pick some of the nice stuff to make the vinegar with. This stuff back here looks really nice, and it hasn't gone to seed yet. See how pretty that looks? So we're going to pick a bunch of this, and this will go up to the house with the rest of our herbs. This is a Russian tarragon, and this is a 5-year-old plant. So keep in mind, if you are wanting to plant Russian tarragon, that it will need quite a bit of space. Okay, we can get in and out now. So let's go get our onions harvested. I have all of my beautiful herbs in my wagon here, so I think we'll empty this out first, because I do want to use this to put all my onions in to bring them over to the greenhouse. So I think what I'll do, just to save myself the trip up to the house, is put all of this into the greenhouse. And if I do end up forgetting it, it'll just dry in there. What you'll notice about my onions is that the tops are flopped over. You can see that all with the onions that are in behind me here. And this will happen naturally, where this part starts to weaken. The top flops over. That signals to the plant it's time to put all those sugars back down into the bulb for it to store over the winter in the ground. One of the things that you can do if you want to kind of speed this process along a little bit is go and knock your tops over when some of them are starting to fall over naturally, and that's what I did a few days ago. Normally I would like to leave them for a week or two in the ground with them flopped over like this, but I was checking the weather forecast and we're supposed to get some rain. In fact, it's starting to drizzle right now. And I want to get my onions out of the ground before the ground starts getting saturated. And so that's one thing. The other thing is I have a ton of processing yet to do, and I'm going to be preserving my onions a little bit differently than I have in the past. I'm going to be freeze drying a lot of them, and I'm also going to be making a ton of French onion soup, which I use for a base for all kinds of recipes over the winter time. So I'm not as worried about storage ability as I normally am. This is what happens when your onions get a lot of rain. When they start getting large like this, is they'll start to split like this. I'm going to just wash this up and actually use this onion right away. But if I were to leave all of these onions in the ground, even though technically they could use another week, I could risk losing a bunch of them because we're supposed to be getting rain. In fact, it's starting to drizzle right now. So I'd much rather get them out now. These ones are called Red Wing. They are supposed to be a really good storage onion. I have not grown these ones before, but I am certainly going to be again. They are just stunning. I started all of my onions from seed this year rather than onion sets. I have used onion sets for years. Biggest reason is because they're easy. And I tried starting my onions from seed for years, for a couple of years anyway, and I was never successful. But I used my friend Crystal from the Whole Fed Homesteads method. I'll link her video down in the show notes for you. She's a fantastic gardener, and I used her method for starting seeds and growing onions, and I will definitely do it this way from now on because it worked incredibly well. Remember back at the beginning of the gardening season, I talked about wanting to do a side-by-side comparison, trimming my greens on the top of my onions and not trimming them, and to see whether that impacted the size of the bulb at all. So these two were both trimmed. I obviously slacked off at some point here because these ones weren't trimmed. And there is a difference in those ones. So this one is a lot bigger than this one, and they were both trimmed. So here is an example. So this one is a not trimmed onion, and this one is a trimmed onion. And the not trimmed onion is significantly larger than this one. However, there are quite a few of the onions that weren't trimmed that are also smaller. So all in all, I think I only trimmed around 10 of them, and they pretty much grew exactly the same for both. So you can always trim your onions. A plane flying overhead. If you do want your onion greens and you want to dehydrate those to make different things with throughout the winter time, absolutely go ahead and trim your onions. But if you're doing it to try to make a larger onion, at least with this experiment, it didn't really seem to make too big of a difference. Whenever you're handling any type of vegetable, especially if it's for storage, just try to be gentle, because even though onions are pretty hardy or sturdy, you can still bruise them. It can just cause them to rot faster than they would otherwise. My goodness, these are beautiful onions. My word. In order to cure my onions, I'm going to be laying them out like this until the tops are completely dry, especially this part right here, and then I'll be cutting them off, and I'll show you how I string them up when we get to that point. And this usually takes 3 to 4 weeks or so. And normally you want to cure your onions or your garlic or anything like that out of direct sunlight. And we are in a greenhouse here, but I do have 2 layers of UV protection for these, and I cured my onions in here last year, and I think the year before as well, with great success. It stays a lot warmer in this greenhouse than it does in other areas, so they dry out fairly quickly, and they're protected from the elements and everything. I might end up putting a fan in here just to keep the airflow happening, and if it does get too hot, I can open the door, and I also have some vents in the ceiling that I can open up as well. But the heat honestly isn't too big of a risk this time of year because our temperatures are cooling down so significantly. Smells really good in here with all these onions and all the herbs that I have on the rack behind me here. So like I said, my plan is to preserve these a little bit differently. I will string some of them up to hang down in my cold room. That's why I've decided just to lay them all out here. But I am planning on canning a ton of them with bone broth to make like a French onion soup that I use for a base for lots of different recipes. I'm also going to be freeze drying a ton of them too. So I'll lay them out here, and I'll probably come down and take a bunch up to the house and just kind of process them as I have time to do that. But the added benefit of just planning on having them all cured is that if I don't get to the actual chopping and canning and all of that, I can do that at any point once they're in the root cellar, or in the cold room rather. I don't store my onions in the root cellar because the humidity level is too high and they end up rotting in there, so I store them in my cold room in the house, which is nice and dry. If you don't have a rack like this, is to use like a cattle panel or concrete mesh, and then you can hang them upside down this way. I used to do that for years with the bulb kind of at the top of the concrete mesh and then this hanging down below, and you can just use a few sawhorses. That's a really effective way of drying them as well. These onions are so beautiful this year. I'm thrilled with them. Eyes burning. Just being in here with all these onions, my eyes are burning. And I'm also running out of space. That is not a problem I mind having. This is definitely the best onion harvest I have ever had. I am thrilled with this. As I was walking up out of the greenhouse, I spotted this beautiful Cinderella pumpkin. And one of the things I noticed right away was how bright orange it is, which indicates its ripeness. But the thing that you're looking for if you are going to be curing your pumpkins or your squash on the vine is for the stem to dry out and become kind of brittle, so it's really easy to snap it off right around there, and that tells you that your pumpkin is cured. And look at this. This is the first time I think I have ever had a pumpkin that's actually going to be fully cured on the vine, because this is just about there. That's so awesome. And I have some more beautiful orange Cinderella pumpkins. Cinderella pumpkins are a really good pie pumpkin, and that's my plan with these ones. So many beautiful squashes. This squash down here is just starting to dry out on the stem. Still a little ways to go yet though. It would be so amazing this year, after how crazy this weather has been this year, if I actually end up having cured on the vine squash. Oh my goodness. What do I spy in there? This is a butternut squash that is actually starting to ripen on the vine. Butternut squash are one of my favorite squash to grow, but they also are a longer season squash. These ones are called Victory butternut, I think, and they tend to be a shorter season one, and they're the ones I always grow. But I almost always have to ripen them on my covered deck. And this one is actually starting to turn that peachy, yellowy color. That is really exciting. I didn't even know that squash was hiding in there. In fact, I didn't even know that I planted a butternut squash plant down in here. Super exciting. I cannot wait to do the squash harvest, my friends. It is one of my favorite harvests of the year. I have some zucchini to harvest here. One big one. And some nice little perfect sized ones here. I think this might be it for the zucchini for this year. Oh, look at this. We have quite a few on this one. So these ones are called Romanesca, and I really like them. It's the first year that I've grown them. But they're a really nice zucchini. We have some other smaller ones down here. This one has been nibbled on by something. Super happy with this harvest. It's exciting. But I did want to get a couple of pieces of our horseradish root, and I know I'm going to forget if I don't do it right now. One of the things about horseradish root to keep in mind is that it is very hot, and breathing in the fumes from it when you're working with it can be dangerous. So it is something to be aware of. I just make sure that I have a well ventilated place that I am processing my horseradish into sauce when I'm processing it into sauce. And so this is what I'm looking at. This is horseradish root here. Here's another one here. So I'm going to dig out a bunch of these, while leaving, of course, a lot to grow back again next year. I have this horseradish plant growing in a little rock bed here, and it's not really the most ideal position for this plant because it makes growing pulling the roots out a little bit more difficult. So I actually think that next spring I will move this to a better location. There's a nice big one. It's another nice one. There, I think that should do us for now. So I'm just gonna fill that hole back in. I'm trying to make a plan here to be most effective. So think what I'm going to do is grab all the celery here and get that into the wagon, and then head up over to the apple tree over here and get all those apples picked, bring all of that up to the house, and then kind of see where I'm at this point, because while I am on definitely the other end of this cold, I'm starting to feel a little bit worn out and I don't want to push it too hard. So what we might do today is get all the harvesting done, and then in the next video we will get all of this processed, because that way I can have a bit of time to rest and I'll do the processing tomorrow. So I think that's probably what we'll end up doing. This is one of the things about the homesteading, farming lifestyle, even just having a big garden, is that when things need to be dealt with, they need to be dealt with no matter how you're feeling. So even if you're really sick, if the cow needs to be milked, you need to milk the cow. It's one of the things that I really like about calf sharing. So that's keeping the calf with their mama and just separating at night and milking in the morning. Is that when, like if we get to the point where, say, everybody's too sick and there's nobody that can go out and milk the cow or whatever, we can actually just leave the calf with their mama and not have to worry about it. Because if you're just milking and you don't have a calf with your cow, there is no option to do that, because otherwise mama will end up getting mastitis, which is an infection that can actually kill your cow. So not something that you want to mess around with. There's definitely some things today that I could probably leave, like the celery, for instance, that I could leave and do another day, but I just know how busy my next couple weeks are. So I'm trying to pace myself a little bit so that nothing goes to waste. I've been really trying this year to not have any waste in my garden. I've been mostly successful. I think where I probably failed the most this year was with the pickling cucumbers. It was just such a bad year and they were coming in so slowly that I kind of just gave up on them. And I ended up having quite a few that I probably could have turned into something that I didn't. And I'll just end up going to the chickens when we do the big garden clean out in a few weeks. But this celery is really easy because I am freeze drying it. So I can just get it washed and chopped up and thrown in the freezer and just freeze dry it as I have room in the freezer. This is my second big harvest of celery that I've done this year. It was a really good celery year. I think my heads were bigger last year, but I planted so much this year that ew. Oh my goodness, my friends, I have an earwig in here. That is insane. I have never seen an earwig. Oh no, it's gone. No, I have never ever seen an earwig in this region before. What the heck? That's so interesting, because Dan said that he saw an earwig down at his mom's by her apple tree, and he was totally shocked because we grew up in the Okanagan where there's lots of earwigs. And like I said, we've never seen one, and now I just saw one in there. That is so weird. Anyway, I don't know what I was saying when I got distracted by that earwig. That's so weird. I've had some big harvest days this year, but I think this is definitely the biggest. Was thinking of doing potatoes today as well, but I definitely think I'm going to put that off for later on this week. This is so sweet. I asked one of my kids if they could bring me down some bins to harvest these apples. So I have some bins down here, and she left a note that said, "You're welcome. Love you, Mama." So sweet. Okay, let's harvest some apples. Norlands, and whoops, and they are delicious and sweet. A lot of the fruit that we can grow up here, where did you go? Aha. A lot of the fruit that we can grow in our region is quite small, and usually more on the sour side, but these ones are quite sweet and not a bad size for a northern apple. It's not a bad size. These are definitely ready. They're just falling off the tree. One of the big issues that people have growing apples in our area is that black bears love apples. My mother-in-law has had a black bear coming around her place, and last year climbed right up into the apple tree and broke a bunch of the branches and ate all her apples. But because we have Great Pyrenees, we have only ever seen a bear on our property once, and in fact that was this year. It had gotten up and wanted to get into my beehives, but we haven't seen him since then. Thank goodness. But they certainly, a black bear would certainly never be able to get into the forest garden. Number one, it's fenced, although that's not a big deterrent for a black bear, but they would have to get through our dogs in order to get here. And I don't think there's any way that would happen. It would have to be pretty sneaky and pretty quiet to get past my dogs. There's one beautiful basket of apples. A couple last quick things that I want to do before I take all that up to the house, and that is to go down, grab our tomatoes from the greenhouse, because I certainly don't want to lose any of those precious fruits. These Cherokee Purple are definitely becoming one of my favorite tomatoes, but one thing I will say about them, and this was pointed out by one of you in the comment section and has definitely been backed up by my own experience, is that when they start ripening, it's a good idea to pull them off the vine and finish that on the counter, because they split really easily because they ripen so quickly. And unless you're staying really on top of it and coming out and checking your plants a couple times a day, which I am certainly not, then you're going to end up losing them. And they are a fabulous tomato. My favorite thing about them, the flavor is really good, but is they're a nice big tomato, and I have a hard time growing larger tomatoes up here. So just, yeah, definitely keep a close eye on those ones. Another beautiful basket of tomatoes from the high tunnel. So I shared with you last time that I'm keeping a running tally, and that's close to 20, I think it was 25 pounds. One of those bins of tomatoes, so I'm around 125 pounds at this point of tomatoes that have come out of the high tunnel. Of course, I've eaten quite a few too, just fresh in the high tunnel. So that's just a rough estimate, but I'm gonna try to keep track. Okay, let's close up the greenhouse. Let all these guys cure. We'll get all this gorgeous produce, the apples, the tomatoes, all brought up to the house. And tomorrow I will get all of this processed, and I will share that with you in the next video. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.